it play and call it work.
Hey everybody, Matthew here from MiniWarGaming.com, and welcome to this Warhammer 40k 8th edition review. Now you might be thinking, Matthew, you reviewed 8th edition 2 weeks ago, to which I say, no, I didn't. I did an overview. I showed you the phases, talked about how it changed, and then we did a ton of faction focuses, and we did an unboxing and showed the contents of the box set from Dark Imperium, and Dave and I played that. We've gotten rules wrong, we've gotten rules right, we've figured out all sorts of stuff. We've done a lot of coverage, which hopefully you've enjoyed over the past couple of weeks. But now that we've got a bunch of games under our collective belts, we are going to talk about doing a review. So here I'm going to talk about, after having a conversation with a lot of the MiniWarGaming staff, I've come up with a list of things that I like about 8th edition and things that we do not like about 8th edition. But let me just give you a spoiler alert before we go any further. We like 8th edition. So as much as we're going to talk about things that we don't like about it, really overall, we're really enjoying this edition change. It is a welcome change. It has added a lot of new life and a lot of new fun into the game. So overall, thumbs up on the new edition. But there are things, of course, that we don't like. But we're gonna cover those later on. Now, after this review is done, we actually have a nice 2,000-point match play battle report for you. It is me versus Konstantin, as you might have seen him in some of our other battle reports. He's been here for a couple weeks filming with us from Germany, which has been awesome. We were playing Tyranids versus Admech, and Tyranids really have gotten better. I haven't played against Admech, but I've heard that they're doing pretty well in this edition as well, so I look forward to challenging Konstantin. You'll see that game. There'll be a link in the video description below to that 2,000-point match play, and you'll notice that we've moved away from power levels, not because they're not good, and I will talk about power levels, but because for doing match play and the type of battle reports we want to do, points definitely makes more sense, and especially now that we've kind of gotten used to the game. But 2,000 points match play, Tyranids versus Admech in the MiniWarGaming Vault. If you're not a Vault member, I want to just talk about that just for a second, if you don't mind. If you do mind, like, just skip. I don't know, somebody put the timestamp where to skip to. But essentially the Vault is what allows us to do what we do. Some people get the misconception that if all we did was put more of our videos out for free, that we should be able to make enough money through YouTube advertising. And I can tell you 100% that that would never actually be the case. Because right now, with all the views that we get on our videos, YouTube advertising revenue barely, if sometimes not even, pays the lease of the building that we are in. And so that's just a small percentage of our costs. In fact, the lease is a small percentage of costs compared to all the wages, models, and terrain that we purchase and everything else. Vault members make this happen. This video is free because Vault members paid for it, which is pretty awesome when you think about it. So thank you so much to our Vault members. Of course, being a Vault member has, you don't have to join it to be altruistic. About 55 to 60% of the videos we make go in the MiniWarGaming Vault. You get extra battle reports, reviews, you get more narrative campaigns, you get painting tutorials if you join the silver level, and so much more. All of that, you can get a free 7-day trial if you're not a member right now, and that was a great time to try it out, because for 7 days you get access to everything. We do not have any limits of what is accessible during the trial. And that includes all the stuff we've put out in the past couple of weeks for all the faction focuses. So if you just want to try it out and then cancel, that is perfectly fine. I won't hold that against you. Even if you forget to cancel and you wanted to, we have a 30-day money-back guarantee. So really you have a 37-day trial, because you can just wait 29 days into it and then cancel, and we'll give you your money back. Because we really don't want your money unless you really want to be a Vault member. And the reason that we have a 7-day free trial is because most people end up keeping it because they realize it's not that expensive, it has tons of awesome content, and it helps support us so we can put out even more content. And advertisement. Let's get into the review. So we're going to start with the pros, because I like to start positive. Maybe I'll save a couple of the pros for the end, because if you end on a negative note, it might sound like we don't like 8th edition, but we really do. So I'm just going to go through them. As you can see, I've made some really fancy notes. I've gone through and talked to each person and just written down in point form things that they liked and things they didn't like, including things I like and things that I don't like. So let's just start with the pros. First off, one thing that we've noticed is we're all having a lot of fun. The whole game meta has been reset. Every single army got an update at the same time, and that's a big deal, and it is hard to do. And you know, it's kind of, when you go through it, you can see that they've made some interesting decisions as they've rewritten a lot of the rules. I would even go as far as to say some mistakes in points values and how rules work. But hopefully, as we see new books come out, that we'll see those ironed out. If we look at the format of Age of Sigmar when it came out with a general destruction and death and all those kind of things, and then they slowly came out with each of the factions on their own. And the game has improved as they've come out with those, especially when they came out with the General's Handbook. 40k essentially feels like they took what they learned from Age of Sigmar and improved on it, mostly. And the parts that I would say not mostly would be in the cons section, as you will find out. So we really are having fun with it. And overall, we're finding the game does play faster. It's hard to tell exactly how much faster because we're still doing a lot of rules lookups, because all of our stat lines have changed so much that you just can't assume anymore what anything does, or how well it hits, or how hard it hits, and all of those kind of things. One thing that I really enjoy, and that I notice a lot of other people enjoy, is the bringing back the old school style hit modifiers, armor modifiers, and damage, as well as movement values. So bringing these things that you see, we saw in Armageddon. Obviously, we saw in older editions of 40K. If you're one of the veterans, you'll remember these from older editions as well. So things, when you add in armor modifiers rather than straight up armor ignoring or not ignoring, a binary yes or no, it adds a lot to the dynamics of the game. Like, for example, a 2-up save becomes a lot more valuable when you know the developers of the game aren't giving tons of just ignore 2-up saves out there. Because in 7th edition, you saw a lot of plasma and you saw a lot of grav cannons and grav guns, all of which were AP2. So all of a sudden, your very expensive Terminators, which you're paying a lot of points so they have that resilience, are pretty useless. Well, both plasma and grav still are pretty good at ignoring armor, but they're no longer the go-to weapons anymore because of how the meta of the entire game works. And so a lot of weapons are going to be like -1 armor or -2 armor, which means if you're the one that has a little bit of armor penetration, you're going to enjoy the fact that now that makes a difference against those 2-up saves and 3-up. There was nothing like, if you're an orc with your 6-up save, everybody ignored it. Or if you had a weapon that was AP5 or AP4, AP4 was the dumbest AP. It was effective against some things for sure, but for the most part, it's like, I just want AP3. Otherwise, just pretend it's AP6 and we'll just call it a day. But it's just, it felt so close to doing something, but not doing quite enough. Whereas now, those AP5 weapons are generally, not always, but generally -1 armor. Not bolt guns are no minuses. Your AP4 weapons are often -1 or -2, and then your AP2 weapons are -3 and sometimes -4. But thankfully your Terminators still have their invuln save, so when you get hit by that plasma, you still have a chance to ignore that. So the AP modifiers are really fun. Every weapon now has a damage stat. A lot of them are just 1. What damage does is after you've wounded, after they've failed to save it, once you get to the point of actually dealing the damage to the unit, it tells you how much damage it does. So if it's damage D3, then you roll D3, and that's how many wounds the model takes. It doesn't spill over, so it's really effective against multi-wound things like vehicles and monsters, or just multi-wound infantry. But it doesn't help against infantry. So I personally like that a lot, because I enjoy when a weapon is clearly anti-horde or clearly anti-tank. And so in 7th edition, you had these interesting weapons like las cannons, which it was like, well, what are they good at? What are they really good at? When you shoot at a vehicle, there was a chance that they just straight up blew it up. But there's also a pretty good chance that they didn't do anything important. And they're only 1 shot. And if you ever fired it at a monster, well, you just laughed, because the monster's creature is like, I don't care. You fire, what, 1 las cannon? You're going to take 1 wound off me. Now the las cannon is actually pretty terrifying. Both the vehicles, which it was already scary to before, but at the same time, it was like, oh, is it even worth firing? But they're scary to monsters as well, because they do D6 damage. They have a high strength, they have a good armor modifier, and so they're able to modify the armor just like they did before, but they do D6 damage. And so that monstrous creature, who before would laugh as it only did 1 wound to them, now it does D6. So it's actually scary. So a lot of the weapons there's a big shift in the meta in the weapons. Like Steve is busy ripping all the grav weapons off of his Dark Angels. He's not actually. And he's going to be throwing flamers on everything, because flamers are the new awesome weapon apparently, because they can auto hit everything, including flyers. And they are scary, super scary. And did I mention they're scary? But grav weapons aren't as big a deal anymore. Flamers are all of a sudden a really big deal. Missile launchers are actually really good now, and they're scary. Las cannons are good again. Meltas are fun, because now at half range they do more damage to anything, not just vehicles. So it's allowed them to create I feel, a much more diverse range of weaponry and effects in game, rather than this whole binary, does it ignore my armor, or does it not ignore my armor? Does it insta-kill me, or does it not insta-kill me? Or when they finally introduce the really dumb destroyer weapons, does it just break the game, or does it not break the game? And it's just, I didn't like that. Now they can go all the way up to strength 16 or strength 20 or strength 15, and these things actually have an in-game effect and they matter. Also, anything can wound anything. Some people would think that's a con. It's actually good. Just play the game and you'll see what I mean, because most of the things that are low strength, hitting those land raiders, yeah, they're winning them on 6s, but then he has a 2-up save. He's got a lot of wounds. So it actually doesn't do much, but he can do something, and that's nice. That's one thing I felt with the game, is that almost everything I bring can do something. Does that mean they will? Well, no. I still don't want to charge and fire a bunch of last guns at a land raider. It's not going to kill it. But if the land raider's down to 2 wounds, I would fire last guns at it, because then if I can finish it off, that's a pretty big deal. Something else would have had to do the initial damage, but at least my last guns are there and they could possibly finish it off, which is pretty awesome. Huge thing that I love. This was maybe one of my top things. Monsters and vehicles, their rules have been merged. We've gotten rid of armor values. Now vehicles have wounds. Monsters and vehicles have a lot of wounds. Basically, Carnifexes are probably on the lower end of wounds for monsters. I haven't seen every single one. Like, I know the Admech has some, and they only have 8 wounds. But like Turvogarms have 14 wounds. Hive Tyrants have 10 wounds. Vehicles typically have anywhere from 10 to 14 wounds. And so all these wounds have gone up, making vehicles and monsters more survivable. But remember, at the same time, they introduced a damage mechanic, which means that the right weapons that are supposed to be anti-vehicle and anti-monster will still be anti-vehicle and anti-monster, but allows the smaller arms fire to still hurt the vehicles, but not just take it out because it only has 4 or 5 wounds. And so it is going to be the era of monsters, that's for sure. And definitely we're going to see vehicles playing a very key role in 8th edition, for better and for worse as well. But I like the fact that they converged them. You know, I'm going to wait for the cons to talk about the one thing I don't like about it. But still, it's really nice to see it. You have to totally play different with vehicles now. They feel different, but I like that they merged it. The one thing I've been talking about, actually I think I started talking about it when I first started playing. I noticed that it was weird that my Carnifex, as long as he had 1 wound remaining, he was at full effect, whereas the vehicles could lose weapons, they could get immobilized, they could get one-shotted, and it felt weird that they were the same. And people are like, well, there's biological in the Carnifex. It's like, oh, come on. You could totally compare biological and mechanical being the same thing. Engines and weapons to hearts and limbs, whatever. So they've put those together, which is really good. A lot of things have been simplified. Psychic Phase has been simplified, which is great. Flyers have been simplified, which is great. If you really want to get into the game fast, I know a lot of people were commenting saying don't play power level, but I think you're doing a disservice if you discount power level for how good it is in the game. For balance or for match play, if you're trying to do like tournaments, or if you really want to be competitive with your friends, points, not power, is definitely the way to go. But I loved building lists with power level, because the way I would build them is I would grab my models, I'd put them on the table and make an army the way I want to. I would calculate its power level in like 30 seconds, and then I would adjust it to what it needed to be. All the little nitpicking of exactly which weapons and upgrades they each have is not an issue with power level. Now I realize that can be abused. Some armies love it. Genestealer Cult loves power level. They can get a lot more points per power level. Astra Militarum hates it. Tyranids are about on par with whatever it is, and so it's not going to be balanced. But when we played the games, they were fun, and the games often were close, so it didn't really matter. But yes, of course, points are going to be important once you really get used to the game. But when you're getting somebody into the game, you don't have to show them this nitpicking points value thing. You can just go jump right into power level, throw together a quick army and play it. So I really like that aspect of it, and I do think it really adds to the game. Now, talking about not rules thing, but they have advanced the storyline, of course, throughout the Gathering Storm books, and then the 40k rulebook itself advances the storyline as well, which is really nice. They got rid of templates. Some people hate this. I think I'm neutral about this. I don't hate it, nor do I love it. I do miss placing a flamer when I see somebody blob up and I have this torrent flamer. I'm like, oh, I really wish I had my torrent flamer right now. But then he wouldn't have blobbed up if I had flamers. So I guess it kind of just whatever. It doesn't allow me not to worry quite as much about placement, which some people will say, well, that makes the game too simple, but it's complicated enough. I just have to tell you that after playing lots of games. It feels weird at first not to use templates, instead rolling a random number of attacks that you have and then still rolling to hit, except for flamers, which I'll auto hit. But once you get used to it, I think overall I like it better without templates. But I think really in the end I'd say I'm neutral. To me, it wasn't either an improvement nor was it worse. It does allow for certain rules mechanics to interact better. For example, in 7th edition, you couldn't overwatch with weapons that did blast, because how would you resolve that? Now, a small blast typically has been translated to a weapon that does D3 shots, and large blast typically is a weapon that does D6 shots. So if you're getting overwatched, if if you're charging my guy with a missile launcher, I can be like, I'm going to fire a frag missile, which, you know, I should be able to do in Overwatch if we're thinking thematically. And I get D6 shots. Still hitting on 6s, but I get D6 of them. So all of a sudden, those missile launchers are really scary to charge. And flamers are even worse because they do D6 auto hits now. And then before it would be D3 auto hits in the Overwatch, but now they're just D6 shots that all hit. So that works in Overwatch as well. So flamers are going to be a big deal. Close combat has been drastically improved, I would say. It's deadlier, it is more important, it is less important when it comes to the fallback rules, but at the same time, it's the way it all interacts with everything really changes the game. You're going to find more first turn charges than you're used to. If your first few games, you might not like that if you're a shooting army until you realize how to play against it and how to deploy against it, and then you realize, oh, that's not so bad. But your first couple games, you're gonna be like, well, that's dumb. Some people really complain about the fact that you can charge one unit and then pile into another. They think it's gimmicky. I think it's awesome. Not because it's gimmicky, but because it really forces you to think about your tactics and your positioning. So it's actually a lot more nuanced than you might think. And I get that some people aren't gonna like it. That doesn't matter. It's a game, so who really cares in the end? But overall, I think it's a drastic improvement. The fact that when you charge, you get to strike first, rather than being based off of initiatives. So armies like Orcs and Tyranids have got a huge advantage in that market. Harlequins are good, if you can believe it. So they're pretty awesome that way. So I love the way Pylon works. I love the way close combat works. And I think another one of my big top things is they have a much better reserve system. Even though in my first couple games I kept forgetting to bring my guys in from reserves, you now just place guys in whatever reserve type they have, and at the end of the movement phase, any movement phase, you just bring them in. You don't have to roll to see if they come in, they just come in. So as long as you don't forget to do it, like I kept doing in my first couple games because I wasn't used to that, it's dramatically improved. And in match play, you can't have more than half your army in reserve, so you don't have to worry about an army totally just being an army denial, like you could see drop pod armies doing that before, or lots of other armies abusing that. This still can be abused, of course, but it's way better. There's no scattering either. Most of the rules are you just place your models more than 9 inches away from the enemy, and away you go. There's definitely going to be less Death Stars, or I should say smaller Death Stars, or maybe even no Death Stars, because characters can't join units. They still all have aura abilities, so they can stack up against each other, but it's just, they're not as powerful as they were before. You're not going to get the Librarius Conclave on bikes joining a command squad of Iron Hands on bikes with Storm Shields with really good Feel No Pain because of the captain with his Warlord trait and a special relic, being joined by Saint Celestine, who allows them to reroll their charge, with 2 Ministorm Priests with a relic that lets them get their automatic War Hymn, so they have reroll wounds and their saves in close combat, plus having Zealot giving them hatred, letting them reroll their hits. Was there anything else in there? I think that was pretty good. And then all those librarians being a Librarius Conclave just doing ridiculous psychic stuff. And then, oh, well, at least it's a blob of guys so they can't do anything. Well, once they're done killing your army, they can all just split off and go and get separate objectives. Yeah, that doesn't exist anymore. Not at least in that. We're going to have new metas and new problems that people are going to find. But in the end, that is not one of them. So, yeah, that's fun. Another big thing is you have alternate deployment. And deployment, you start playing the game basically from deployment, because you alternate deployment and whoever finishes first gets to choose who goes first. So how you build your list is going to be huge when it comes to determining who gets first turn. So that's a lot of the good stuff. There's more good stuff than that, which I'll come back to a couple more of them at the end. But let's talk now about the things that I don't like about Warhammer 40k 8th edition. Talking about the cons of the game, it's funny, at first when we were playing, we were thinking, this game is great, I can't find anything negative. But the longer you play, of course, the more things you find that you don't like. Now, when I talk about cons, a lot of these are very subjective, that they're things I don't like, or that other people here don't like. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're wrong, or that they're incorrectly written, although that is one of the problems we'll talk about in a second. It's more just that we're like, oh, they did so well making the game this way, why did they do this? And so keep that in mind. This is a lot of subjective, but I am going to be quite honest here. So I'm just going to kind of take the gloves off and be like, all right, 40k 8th edition, why are you like this? For example, my first point, and this might seem nitpicking, but when you play the game, you can kind of see it, you can feel it, is invulnerable saves have become a little too common. Now, I don't really mind 5-up invuln saves being everywhere. I've actually gained a few in my Tyranid army, and that's fine. But the problem is there's a lot more 4-up and 3-up invuln saves than there should be. For example, Terminators with Storm Shields. Why are they 3-up invulns? We now have a beautiful armor modifier system that we could use to make the storm shields even cooler, what I would do instead is a storm shield gives you +2 armor. So your 2-up armor save essentially becomes like a 0+ armor save. Now before we go any further, you're like, well, you can't have a 0+. There is no such thing as changing what your armor save is. You just get a modifier to your roll. So if I have a +2 to my roll, it's not that my armor save becomes a 0+, it's that whatever I roll, I add 2 to. And as you can see from today's commentary from the designers, that you can't reduce a die roll below 1, but you can increase it above 6. So if I get a +2, then if I roll 6, it actually becomes an 8. But then when you introduce armor modifiers, you can see how that works together. If I get hit by something that's a -3 armor modifier, so it's meant to punch through, but I got a storm shield, my 2+ becomes a 0+, becomes a 3+, which is the same as the invuln save. Now you might think, well, then why do you care? Well, it's because if I get hit by a -1 armor save, that 2+ remains a 2+. If I get hit by a -4 armor save, which they do exist, then my 2+ becoming a 0+ becomes a 4+. So my storm shield is really good. You can still keep that Terminator save of 5+ invuln. So if there are some -6 armor saves out there, but once you get to those, it's like, okay, you're totally ignoring my storm shield. Now I just go back to my basic 5-up invuln. I also don't like the fact that they use invulns in a lot of places where they're talking about the reason for it being that the target is fast. Like Gene Stealers have a 5-up invuln because of lightning reflexes. Well, if I'm fast, make me -1 to hit. They have that in there. There's lots of abilities and rules that force somebody to get -1 to hit. When you're firing at a stealth suit for the Tau, they just give you -1 to hit. They don't give them an invuln. If you're firing at things near venom throats, you get -1 to hit. So they clearly understand that you can modify your ballistic skill with things that are harder to hit. So why give Gene Stealer Cult a 5-up invuln, or Gene Stealers a 5-up invuln? Why not just give them a -1 to hit? Because the Lictors, which are in the same army, are hard to hit, so they're -1 to hit. They don't give them a 5-up invuln. So it seems inconsistent. It's like, what are invulns for? I can understand like a power field, but even that could be an armor modifier. In fact, I would say that you could get rid of invuln saves altogether and the game would be better because of it, and instead introduce different kinds of mechanics. Armor save modifiers for invuln saves that come from power fields or shields or things like that, and to hit modifiers from invuln saves that come from being acrobatic or fast or little or whatever it is that's doing that, or hollow fields. Like, don't let me roll to hit, I hit. I roll to wound, I wound. And then you roll your 5-up lightning reflexes invuln save, and now I miss. I hit you, I wounded you. That 5-up invuln tells me that we were rewinding time and I never hit you to begin with. It's just weird, I don't like that. So I'm not a fan of invulnerable saves. I thought they'd get rid of them, but then when I saw how much they are in there still, I'm like, they just don't need to be there. Especially when you get like army-wide ones on the Harlequins. I would much rather just be hitting them -1 or -2 in some cases, than watching them roll those 4-ups. When I have my rending claws that they're supposed to ignore a certain amount of armor, but these guys are like, whatever, we're just gonna dodge it out of the way. And you might as well just bring your Scything Talons because they're gonna be more effective because they'll hit more often, but I'm lightning reflexy. So yeah, this doesn't make any sense. So I really don't like that. I'm really not a fan of invuln saves, especially when you're introducing the 3-ups and the 4-ups. Also, there's an interesting rule they ported over from Age of Sigmar that rerolls are always done before modifiers. Now you might think, yeah, that sounds pretty cool. And if I have a special rule that says you reroll hit rolls of 1, then we know that, okay, when I roll my die, let's say I had a +1 to hit. The rule book says 1s always fail regardless of modifiers. They don't say they don't get modified, they just say it doesn't matter how they're modified, they fail. So I roll a 1, but I have a +1 to hit. And so if my rerolls were after modifiers, then I would be like, well, that 1 becomes a 2, so I can't reroll it, but then a 1 is an auto fail, so I don't get to reroll it and it sucks. So I get why they said, make sure you do your rerolls before modifiers. But where it gets weird is all of a sudden, if I have a 3+ to hit and I'm shooting on a unit that gives me -1 to hit, and I get to reroll all failed hits because of some ability or psychic power or nearby character, then if I rolled a 3 to hit, I could not reroll it because before modifiers, that was a hit. But then we apply that -1, and a 3+ is now a 2, which is a miss. But I had an ability to let me reroll failed hits, but I don't get to use it. That seems kind of wonky. I know it works the opposite way. In fact, it works even weirder the opposite way. Let's say I have a +1 to hit, and I get to reroll all failed hits, and I have a ballistic skill of 3+. I roll a 2. Now, thankfully, most of those rules say you may reroll the hit. But what if I said you must reroll failed hits? And so that 2 I know is going to be a hit, because the +1 will make it a hit. But because I have to reroll before modifiers, I have to reroll that 2, and now I roll a 1, and now it's a miss. It's just kind of like, why? Why is it that way? I know that in most cases that second part is not as big a deal, but you just get these weird, I know for a fact that every game that we have rerolls that have all reroll all failed, there are going to be comments saying that we're doing it wrong. That when we roll it and we don't re-roll those 3s, we only re-roll the 1s and the 2s, and then the 3s are just misses, people are going to argue it. Even though there will be an FAQ, even though we'll explain it 100 times, it's just not intuitive. It's kind of weird, and why'd you do that? In fact, it could be easily fixed. Here's how you fix it. At the beginning of your core rules, you say, here's a couple definitions. Natural dice rolls is what appears on the die before modifiers. A hit roll is your die roll modified. So if you have a -1 to hit and you roll a 3, your hit roll is 2 and your natural dice roll is 3. You can then use those 2 words everywhere. They use hit rolls everywhere, but it's never clear if it's supposed to be before or after modifiers, because if you think it's clear, and don't be one of those people who's like, come on, Matt, it's actually really, really clear. You're just nitpicking the rules. Like, trust me, there are comments that say that to me, and they're on opposite side of the arguments. One says, yeah, you clearly re-roll that. It's really clear why you're being so dumb. And there's another person saying, yeah, you clearly don't re-roll that. It's pretty clear why you're being so dumb. And like, well, I can't be dumb on both sides. I can only be dumb on the one side. So it's not clear, and I'm not being nitpicky because it creates weird situations. And I don't like that. So create the definition, natural dice rolls and hit rolls. And then when I have a captain nearby, instead of saying reroll hit rolls of 1, say reroll natural dice rolls of 1. If I have a gets hot rule, say if you roll a natural die roll of 1, you die. Not if you roll a hit roll of 1, and now hit rolls can't be reduced below 1. So if you have a -1 to hit, you gets hot on a 1 and a 2. But if you have a +1 to hit, you never get hot, but you still fail when you roll a 1. It's just that 1 becomes a 2, but it's an auto fail because it's a 1 before modifiers. Like, that seems just weird. Weird that as soon as I have a +1, I am now immune to anything that overheats and would kill me. It's, rules is written, we're gonna play it, and that's how we're gonna do it. I just don't like it. So this is the con. I'm telling you the cons. I don't like it. There's a lot of other rule ambiguities. The big one being, and a lot of this is not thinking about 7th edition, but using terminology for 7th edition. There's a lot of feel no pain type rules where it says something along the lines of, whenever a model from this unit loses a wound, roll a d6. On a 5 or a 6, it ignores that. Or it does not lose that wound. That's pretty straightforward. But then you get another one that says, whenever a model from this unit suffers an unsaved wound. Well, when do you suffer a wound? And before you're like, whoa, you're nitpicking wording again, go and read the page on shooting and tell me when you suffer a wound. And you might be one of those people saying, well, obviously it's when you lose a wound. But if you roll a wound roll and you make it, it says you suffer damage. And then later on, under damage, you lose a wound. You never suffer a wound. And then another one will say, whenever you take mortal wounds, or lose a mortal wound or a wound, then you get to reroll it. So does that mean the other ones don't get to reroll mortal wounds? Well, when you go look at the designer's commentary, they basically say, well, no, all those are the same. They have different wording, but they're all the same. Whenever you lose a wound, mortal wound otherwise, you get to make the roll. It's like, okay, this brings me to another pet peeve. Why are there no universal special rules? Why do you have to include everything on the data slates? Now, I get that when I open a box of the model, I want to be able to pull out a piece of paper that has all the rules. That's fine. So just copy and paste the universal special rule onto the data slate. But why can't there just be a feel no pain universal special rule? Why can't there be a deep strike universal special rule? Why do all of them have to be called different things and be worded slightly differently, even though in the end they all work the same way? I don't like that. Simplifying for the sake of simplicity, when it doesn't actually make it easier, is not a way to do a rule set. Don't say, when somebody says, well, this game is better because it only has 8 pages of rules, trust me, it has more than 8 pages of rules. It has a lot of pages of rules. They're just all over the place. And they're no longer in a centralized place, which is really annoying. And I was gonna say maybe there's some ease in updating, but there's not. It's actually harder to update, because now if you want to update the way Feel No Pain works, you'd have to update all the data slates with it on it. So you just won't update that rule because it's too hard to do so, even though it might need to be fixed. So it's just removing, just so you have a smaller rule book, when your rule book still ends up being this thick, to me, that's not a good enough rule, or a good enough reason. You need universal special rules. It helps clean up the game. It helps make it faster and more streamlined, even though there's more pages of rules in your main rule book. Riptides are still monsters. What's up with that? Why are they still monsters? They're not monsters. Don't say, well, there's a pilot. Everything has a pilot, except maybe, no, everything has a pilot, except maybe some Tau stuff, I guess. Not the Riptide, though. And so why do the rules that don't work against vehicles work against Riptides, and rules that only work against vehicles not work against Riptides? This is my beef with having monstrous creatures and walkers having no real rhyme or reason to them in 7th edition. And they fixed that. They even made Dread Dice vehicles, but Riptides are still monsters. Why are they still monsters? They shouldn't be monsters. They're clearly vehicles. I'm hoping it was a typo. Yeah, so it'll just get updated and it'll be like, oh yeah, joke's on us. We meant those are vehicles. We're just trying to troll Matt because we heard him complaining about that for the past 8 years. So we thought we'd leave one of them in there just to mess with his head. So also, I should have had a rule book with me. You don't put important rules in the columns where people are used to reading lore and narrative and fluffy things. It's just really hard to find them. When people are like, yeah, that's not how rerolls work. I'm like, where do you see that? Well, it's in the column way over there. Or, oh yeah, the match play. When you read the match play scenario and it says, whoever places the last objective determines the deployment type. Determine doesn't mean random. I'm just trying to say, dictionary definition of determine is you act, you choose. Oh, thank you. You act, you choose, you decide, you use your intelligence. You don't just roll a die and have that be random. You determine it. Unless they're meant that you're allowed to use a command point to re-roll it. Maybe you can use a command point to re-roll it, and that's why you're the one that gets to roll it. What do you guys think of that? Should we be able to use a command point to re-roll the deployment type?
Sure, why not?
I know, maybe that's why. So they are kind of determining. Interesting. Can you use a command point to re-roll Seize the Initiative?
I don't see why not.
Yeah, interesting. I may have answered my own problem there. So maybe that con got moved to the pros, because you are determining if you're allowed to re-roll it. You're determining if you want to keep the random choice that was placed before you. Would you like another random choice, sir? You get to determine that. I guess that's technically determining. All right, so cross that one off the list. But it's still a problem because it says under match play, there are 3 rules of match play. And then there's actually a 4th, which is that it's always random. But that was not under the... Anyway. So yeah, don't put important rules here. I'll show you. I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so you got rules, and then, oh, here's an important rule. And there's an important rule. There's important rules. And you might think, well, that's pretty obvious. It's not, trust me, because they're not actually necessarily on a page to go with. It's not like in the shooting phase, these are the stuff related to shooting. It's just extra random stuff that they have no place to put because they're determined not to have too many pages. I do not think that that's a good idea. You should just have a section for all of these extra rules, or rerolls and characteristic modifiers should just be under core rules in their own sections, not on the side. Okay, so that's not where they go. All right. This is a big pet peeve of Steve. I agree, but at the same time I see how to mitigate it, except when you're playing Space Marines. Why do vehicles get locked in combat? Why do vehicles lock other vehicles in combat? Steve calls it bumper cars. I'm going to charge you with my Rhino. Ah, frick! I can't fire my weapons anymore, even though I'm a frickin' Land Raider! I'm a Land Raider! Why can't I just shoot you while I sit here? 7th edition, that was never a problem. I really think, anything with the fly rule, so all of a sudden, all your hover vehicles are ridiculously overpowered compared to all the other ones, because you can't do that to them. Because trust me, Rhinos don't actually do any damage in close combat. It's just really annoying when they tie up in a Lehman Russ from firing for an entire turn. Like, that's a pretty big deal. I believe that at least heavy vehicles like Lehman Russes and Land Raiders should have a special rule that lets them fall back and fire. Or heck, just fire and just ignore. I think there's some Titanic ones, some of the super heavies, that actually have a rule that says they can fire while locked in combat, just not at the thing that they're locked in combat with. That kind of fixes it, except that they have flamers. Why can't they just toast the guys in front of them with their flamers? Like, oh, I can't fire at these guys right in front of me because they're right in front of me and that would be mean. Or at the same time, why can't vehicles just drive through other enemy models? Maybe not even have them tank shock, no morale checks, nothing like that, no negatives, but just be able to drive through. I played a game where there's a vehicle up against a wall, and I charged it with one guy back here, and then a unit of 3 like this, and they're just these toughness 3 infantry, and it was a frickin' Lehman Russ. It was Pask. And he's like, well, I guess I'm stuck here, not firing my weapons for the next couple turns. I'll just slowly drive over you, hitting you on 6s with my 1 attack now that you've crippled me with your 4 staff over and over again, until he finally killed one of the guys. He's like, yay, I can drive away because I finally killed somebody. It's like, well, why didn't you just run over him to begin with? It doesn't feel right, and it's kind of weird. It simplifies the game. I don't have a huge problem with this. I do have a problem with this, but I don't have a huge problem with this. But yeah, it creates some really weird stuff that you have to really get used to. You got to learn to bubble wrap your vehicles with lots of cheap infantry if you can do that, or just hope that you have lots of ones with the fly keywords so that you can just leave and do whatever the crap you want, because then you can't tie up with people like that. Okay, what did I miss? Oh yes, models. Let me do an example here. No, never mind. I don't have any on hand. Do you measure from the base or from the model itself? Now you might think, well, in the model, or you might think, oh, the base. But that's fine when it's just an infantry model. We always treat the bases themselves. We're not trying to go back to like the first part of Age of Sigmar where they're like, bases don't count as part of the model. They never said that here. Thank goodness, because we do not want to go through that debacle again. But if you have there's basically a lot of rules that vehicles and bikes and monsters can't go to upper levels of ruins unless they have the fly keyword. Okay, no problem. What if we have a building right here, and we have a monster right here, and he's this tall, and there's a guy standing on the edge of the building? When you charge, you don't have to get in base contact anymore. And that would have answered the question, because you'd have to actually get up there, which you can't. Now you just have to get within an inch. So the question is, am I within an inch? And you might be like, oh yeah, obviously. But it does create weird interactions, especially because some of the vehicles have a special rule that says you must measure from the model and not from its base. And if a vehicle has that rule, it implies that you're not supposed to measure from the model, you're supposed to measure from the base. So which is it? Do you measure from the model or from the base? Or is the base counted as part of the model? And if you have this, what about all the vehicles that don't have that? There's a lot of hover vehicles, like there's a lot of skimmer vehicles that have a big model on a tiny little base. Can you never charge it? Because you can't get within an inch of the base? Like, do you not measure? Like, it just seems weird. I think the interpretation should be that the model and the base are all part of the model, and that, yeah, you can charge guys in the top level. And actually, if you stand by the top level, the guys at the top can charge you as well, especially for flyers who are up high and their base is down here. They move up to the building right here. Now a lot of flyers have the hard to hit rule, or the airborne rule, which says you can only be charged by things with the fly rule. But what if the guy with the fly rule is up here? Does he have to go all the way down to your base, or can he just go up to right here, assuming that the building is right here, and you walk up? That's not very clear. We're going to play it that you just kind of look at the model and that's where you can go. So it allows big, tall monsters to charge guys on the top of buildings, as long as they're within an inch of the edge of the building. If they back up, then they can't, which is kind of cool and thematic. But it's not very clear, and that could be clarified. So ambiguities like that could have used another part. And of course, all of this kind of stuff that needs to be cleared up does add to the rules, because, well, guess what? In a complicated game like this, you do need more pages of rules. Some faction-specific problems. Inquisition. They're acolyte henchmen, those toughness 3, 1 wound, ballistic skill 3 guys from 7th edition. They have 3 wounds now and 3 attacks, but they're still 8 points a model. I think that's a typo. Please let it be a typo. But until then, rules is written. Boy, are those guys strong. And then we have the Hemlock Wraith Fighters for the Eldar. They used to fire the 2 heavy D-sides, which was 2 small blast destroyer. Now, small blast turned into D3 shots, right? Well, these ones turned into D3 auto hits. So Hemlock Wraith Fighters now have 2d3 auto hitting strength 10, -4 AP, D6 damage?
D6, yep.
Yeah. Blah! What is up with that? Especially Overwatch. Don't charge one of those guys, because they'll just turn around and vomit their strength 10 all over you, and you'll just die, and you won't have a chance. I think that's a typo. Steve thinks it's a typo, but once again, rules is written. They auto hit. I think that they copied and pasted the rules from the D-Scythe, which was a flamer, and forgot to remove the ability part that says this automatically hits. That's what we believe has happened. So hopefully that's what happened. And why are Devours, Twin Link Devours, everything that was Twin Link before, pretty much, with the exception of Twin Link Devours, just became Twin, which is they just doubled their shots. If you think that's ridiculous, it actually is really cool. Twin Linked autocannons are now just Twin autocannons, which are 4-shot autocannons instead of 2. Broadside battle suits for Tau. Holy crap. They went from 12 strength 7 shots twin linked and 12 strength 5 shots twin linked to 24 strength 7 shots and 24 strength 5 shots. No twin linked, they're just twin. So they don't get to re-roll or anything, but they just get double the number of shots, which is way better than twin linked. But the poor Tyranids, which are awesome by the way, so I can't complain about this too much. Twin linked Devours, They're just devourers now. So Carnifex before had 12 strength 6 shots that he could reroll the hits because he only hits on 4s. Now he just has 12 strength 6 shots that he doesn't get to reroll the hits. That's a big deal. Don't tell me I'm just complaining and that's not a big deal. That's a big deal. And same thing with the Flyrants. And don't say, well, maybe they nerfed that because it was too strong. Yeah, go tell the broadside battlesuits that, because they got double shots. And don't tell me they weren't too strong before, because they are very strong. So everywhere that twin-linked exists, twin-linked assault cannons on flyers now are just double the number of shots. Twin-linked flamers are now 2d6 hits instead of d6 hits. Everywhere it got doubled except for the Tyranids. So what I'm hoping happened here is because they had to write rules for every single faction, which is a lot of work, and they had to play test it all as well, that a few things just slipped through the cracks. That's what I'm hoping happened. And that as they get updated, I don't expect them to actually fix any of these because they're probably, and I'm most certain of it, already in the works of creating entirely new codexes for a lot of these that'll be coming out over the next year. They'll probably get fixed at that point. Until then, at least it's not nearly as bad as when Age of Sigmar came out and there was all sorts of really weird rules and no points values and everything else like that. I think that's all the negatives I can come up with. Too many invulns. Yeah. Anything else that you guys can think of? Anybody want to shout out anything they don't like about 8th edition?
That's it.
Okay, now, if I could talk to you 8th edition 40K as if you were a person and you were here in front of me, I still love you. You know, I've been married to my wife for 12 years. She's not perfect. There are things I could complain about her. I've got 4 kids. They drive me nuts. I love them though. 8th edition, you're like that. You're not perfect. You know, maybe have, in your younger years were better or whatever, but not better. That's, oh, I'm in trouble. No, you know what? She's not gonna watch this. I'm good. But I've grown to love you, and 8th edition actually is way better than 7th. With age comes much better stuff than whatever you had before. And so, like that, I think 8th edition is awesome. I am loving it. I am excited to play it. Let's see if I can come up with one more pro, because now I'm in trouble. I gotta go sleep in the basement now. Meta reserves, no formations. More thematic with the keywords, which is kind of cool. Pretty much every army, I think every army, you have to like choose a keyword to show which high fleet you're from, or chapter you're from, or set you're from for Tau. Less death, simplified psychic, simplified rules, power levels fun, blah, 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 that's reset. Yeah, it's just good. It's just a lot of fun. With all the cons that I can come up with, it's a lot of fun. Okay, nothing's perfect. Games Workshop, I think, did a great job overall. We are all loving it. I can't think of anybody here who's actually got to the point where like, you know what, I really hate this game, it's stupid. I think everybody here has only grown in how much they like 40K because of this edition change. Am I correct in assuming that?
True.
Yeah, I don't think anybody here is saying, you know what, I like 7th edition better. No. Yeah, if you wanted to make a pros and cons for 7th edition, you'd be sitting here a lot longer during my cons list. A lot longer during my cons list. But 8th edition, I think, is going to be a really, really good edition. Furthermore, what I'm really excited for is my next narrative campaign that I'm thinking of doing, and I say that because there's always a caveat that'll change my mind, is the Death Watch, which is an Orc Death Watch thing. And at first I'm like, yeah, I'll use the Necromunda rules because it's really good for small scale. But 8th edition is actually going to be really good for small scale. I don't think it's going to be small scale like if you play smaller points games that'll balance. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying that to develop rules for small scale games with 8th edition is going to be really easy. So like Heralds of Ruin, who have been working really hard on 7th edition kill team rules, I think they're going to have a much easier job in 8th edition kill team rules. That it's going to be a lot more streamlined. It'll be a lot easier to come up with points values and come up with abilities and know what is good and what isn't. It's just going to be a better game that'll scale down. Not that it scales down right now. It doesn't, because the points and the way the squads are all made and all that kind of stuff. But if you want to make it scale down, it'll be a lot easier to scale down. So that's another pro I can think about as well, because it's a streamlined game. So we love you, 8th edition 40K. Games Workshop, you did a great job on this. Of course, there's things that could have been better, but it's still awesome. Even though Riptides are monsters, and they shouldn't be. They shouldn't be, all right? You know, if you're going to change one thing, you could screw up 5 other things. Just make Riptides vehicles. Just please, make Riptides vehicles. I will stay with my non-twin devours if Riptides become vehicles. I don't even care. I don't even have any abilities that would be really good against them. I just want them to be vehicles because it makes more sense. I hope that you enjoyed this review. Don't forget to go watch the battle report between me and Constantine. 2,000 points, Tyranids versus AdMech in the MiniWarGaming Vault at the link below. And stay tuned for tons more 8th edition coverage. Thanks for watching. Happy wargaming.